The House Armed Services Committee will release proposals for the defense supply chain in July. One of the key stakeholders of the defense supply chain has some risk management problems it needs to deal with. Vijay D'Souza is Director for IT and Cybersecurity at the Government Accountability Office. Vijay, welcome. Thanks for coming on the program. What did you look at specifically at the Defense Logistics Agency and why?
Yeah, thanks, Francis. So what we looked at is 6 key inventory management systems that DLA uses to get its job done. And we looked at how well DLA had applied the DoD risk management framework to ensure the cybersecurity of these systems.
What did you find as you looked at these systems, Vijay?
Well, the risk management framework has 6 steps, and for 2 of the areas, basically categorizing the risk of the systems and developing an approach to implementing cybersecurity controls, we thought DLA was doing a pretty good job. But for the other 4 areas, we found some significant weaknesses. At a high level, a lot of the weaknesses related to gaps in kind of documentation and management oversight, but taken together, these are pretty significant issues.
What was it doing well in the 2 areas that it did well, and what were the shortcomings in the other 4, Vijay?
Well, I think DoD and DLA together are trying to use automation to help streamline some of the paperwork and documentation requirements around cybersecurity. So I think this helped them with the 2 areas where we found strengths. So they were able to use some of their automated systems to accurately categorize the risk, and then also use some of the information they already had to identify ways to implement cybersecurity controls. But for the other 4 areas, I think this kind of ended up being a weakness in the sense that DLA seemed to be perhaps overly relying on the systems versus the people to look at the data in the systems. So, for example, we found that the packages that DLA was supposed to prepare to provide to management to sort of sign off or authorize on systems had a lot of missing information in them. And this was because DLA told us they were still kind of new to using the system, and they hadn't necessarily implemented the appropriate workflow to require folks to go back and make sure the packages were complete before they were submitted for approval.
The 6 that you write about are categorizing the system, that's one where they did okay. Selecting security controls, establishing implementation approaches were challenges. Establishing implementation approaches was okay. Assessing security controls, authorizing systems, and monitoring security controls were the shortcomings. What are the risks here for the areas where the DLA came up short?
Well, the risk is that DLA may be missing something in its oversight of these systems, and also maybe missing something in just understanding what risk they're exposed to. No system is going to be 100% secure, so it's important that management understand the trade-offs that they're making when they're authorizing use of these systems. One example that I'll cite is that DLA had a bunch of remedial action plans we looked at, so there were 1,600 actions that DLA needed to take. Over 1,000 of them had exceeded the year deadline for mitigation, and of those, 1/3 needed management approval to kind of sign off saying, hey, we understand this is taking longer than we thought to get this done. There was no evidence of that waiver is what it's called. There was no evidence that that waiver had been approved.
So it sounds like part of this is process and not so much the actual execution, fixing the actual problems. It's basically an authority to operate, it sounds like.
Well, I think it's both. I think part of the point here is that the risk management framework is designed to allow management to take like a holistic view, kind of looking across the whole system, looking at all the risks. And so if you can't get an accurate representation of the big picture, you can also be missing stuff in the details.
Can these be fixed in an enterprise way? Can they be, or do they have to be fixed in a linear way, Vijay? Do they have to get one right before they proceed to the next one?
So you can definitely fix all of them concurrently, but I think the point we want to make, and this kind of came up when DLA responded to our report, they showed evidence that they had addressed some of the individual shortcomings we identified, but what we were looking for is evidence of a systematic fix, that they had changed processes to head off these problems so that they don't occur the next time they do this, or if they're doing it for other systems that we're not looking at.
In your recommendations, did you have specific things that they should do to solve these problems, or were your recommendations less prescriptive, just suggesting they need to figure out some way to move forward?
Our recommendations were at a higher level. We basically wanted them to put the management checks and processes in place to make sure that the information in these security packages was complete, that there weren't errors, that they got needed waivers, and so on. The exact how they were going to do this is up to DLA.
What do you do to move forward? Do you have an intention or a legislative mandate to follow up with this, to follow on and see how DLA has moved forward?
Sure. Well, as with all GAO recommendations, we'll continue to track progress on these efforts and report out to Congress. And DLA is also required to record on its progress in addressing these issues. I would anticipate, given the increasing threats we see to cybersecurity supply chain issues, that we're likely to continue to take looks at this in the future as well.
Vijay D'Souza, thanks very much for joining me. I appreciate your time today.
Thanks. It was great to be here.